They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play.
All right, we're back. The second half of the show. Really excited to jump into this. And a reminder, if you guys are new to BestDayEverMedia, one, that's not a surprise. This is only episode number 6. But a quick reminder, we're doing 5 days a week, weekdays, Monday through Friday. Live shows. The first half, the first hour of the show is really just us covering, stories that have happened in the last 24 hours in regards to politics, economy, personal development, anything and everything in that kind of genre. Second half of the show, we're doing deep dives into different subject matters. Mondays are mainly going to be entrepreneur, personal finance, things related in that kind of theme or genre. Tuesdays, we're jumping more into personal development and health. Wednesdays is politics, history. We're also calling it cheaper than therapy, so that's where we can get into random rants. Then Thursdays, we'll be hitting upon hobbies, random personal interests, things of that nature. And then Friday, more of a community hangout. So because today's Monday, we're going to be exploring one of my favorite business books. And when thinking about business books, I kind of view it as there's a couple different like genres or themes when it comes to business books. There's the general motivation, right? Which is like, you need to get up, you need to put in the work, you got to try hard, lots of like slogans and just general motivation. And there's definitely a place and a time for those books. I definitely get a lot of personal value from them, but those books will often not really allow you to tactically understand what the next steps you need to take in regards to becoming a successful business person are like. On the flip side, another genre when it comes to business and personal finance and books in that ilk is the real tactical oriented books. And I kind of place the 4 disciplines of execution in the latter camp, where it's very focused on execution. It's really just trying to hit upon 4 key points. And I think it does a great job of hitting those 4 key points. And it's because it sets out with such a clear understanding of what it's trying to accomplish. And because it successfully does that is one of the reasons I think it's, one of the, if not the best business book, particularly because I just find so few business books when I read them, I really know like, okay, now I know what I've been doing wrong. Now I know what I need to focus on. Now I know where to kind of pivot in regards to my execution. So before I jump into it, anything you want to say, Adam, in regards to the 4 disciplines of execution?
No, I think you nailed it right on the head. I mean, this is absolutely a tactical book versus what some might call a strategy book. And I think that this type of book really gives you clear and actionable things to start doing day one, which again, I'm a huge fan of. Like I'm a big fan of like Jocko and guys like that, because they're less about like just generally motivating you and firing you up and more about like, hey, here's like, in this case, 4 specific things you can do to improve your business today. And I think that this book does a really good job at that. And it's not superfluous by any stretch of the imagination. Every word in this book seems to be well thought out and is well organized. So yeah, fantastic. I'm excited to dive into it today, Matt.
Nice. And I don't think you can go wrong whether you go audiobook or physical book. I kind of lean towards physical book, particularly when we're talking about like tactical oriented books, because sometimes I find it easier to quickly flip to that page or that chart versus trying to remember, what section in the audiobook it was. But you guys do you in regards to it. But I really encourage you spend some time, check it out, because again, I absolutely love this book. I want to share a quote before we get into the actual meat of the discussion. So, no matter what you are trying to achieve, your success will be based on 2 kinds of measures: lag and lead. Lag measures track the success of your wildly important goal. Lags are measures you spend time losing sleep over. They are things like revenue, profit, quality, and customer satisfaction. They are called lags. By the time you see them, the performance that drove them is already past. You can't do anything to fix them. They are history. And that's from the 4 disciplines of execution. And this is a big one, right? I think a lot of people, when you start out as an entrepreneur, when you start your small business, whatever it is, or even just get into becoming a real estate investor, you often kind of know the direction you need to head in, but rarely do you understand, okay, this is what I need to do in order to get what I want to achieve. A lot of people will say, I want to do $1 million in sales my first year. I want to buy 10 properties as a real estate investor. All those are signs of lag measures. And we're going to get into what exactly makes a lead and lag measure in a second. But the way the book's framed, it first starts off with WIGs. And WIG stands for wildly important goals. And a quick reminder here, if you guys aren't subscribed, definitely go subscribe. You can read this article on our Substack. It's completely free. You can also comment as a free user as well. So you literally don't have to pay us. But we would just appreciate you guys giving us a sub and consuming the information and giving us your feedback in that comment section. So a leader in company should narrow their focus. And I think that this is one of the big things a lot of us struggle with day one as an entrepreneur. There's so many different things you could focus on, right? Is it marketing? Is it sales? Is it HR? Is it getting your accounting software set up? And so by dialing in what a wildly important goal is, it really allows you, whether as an individual or a team, to figure out what's one critical or two max is the way the book frames it, things that you want to accomplish. And failing to achieve this goal will make all other accomplishments seem secondary. So again, we're really focused on like, what's the big domino, as Tim Ferriss often recommends? What's the domino I can knock over that then causes a bunch of other dominoes to be knocked over as well? And again, oftentimes as entrepreneurs, you're not afraid to roll up your sleeves. But if you're constantly off in the weeds, like blazing a trail that's unnecessary or a trail that could be handed off to another team member, you're likely not putting your business in the best position possible. So ideally, 80% of your team's time is spent on day-to-day operations. And in the book, they call that the whirlwind. So that might be, if you're in payroll, producing payroll reports, right? Or if you're in accounts payable, doing your collections, putting together your weekly charts, your weekly reports, whatever that may be. But then you want to spend 20% of your time as a team and as an individual focused on achieving these wildly important goals. To determine a WIG, the way the book frames it is start off with just brainstorming. And really, there's like no wrong answers here. You just want everyone to participate in this process and start asking yourselves, what goal or improvement would have the greatest impact on achieving our overall organizational goal or purpose? And what's the big domino? Now, again, if you're on like the manufacturing team, it may look wildly different than if you're on the sales team, what your individual wildly important goal is. But it's important that you guys all be united and bought into this process. So a handful of rules the book shares that I find very useful when it comes to developing an effective WIG is max 2 goals. So again, you don't want to divide your time trying to achieve 10 or 20 different goals at once. These are supposed to be big goals, big dominoes that will knock over other subsequent goals. Then figure out what battles chosen will actually win the war, right? So again, a wildly important goal must serve the organizational goal or purpose. So you need to make sure that whatever WIG you're setting out for your team or your department is still overall in alignment with the greater organization. In that regards, you don't want to be going in one direction when the rest of the company is going in another direction. Finally, the team must be part of the goal setting process. And the reason this is so important is because you want individuals on the team to actually be bought into the process. So they need to believe in it. They need to participate in it because they're going to be the ones alongside you. They're actually going to be executing on the different objectives necessary to hit that WIG. And then finally, WIGs must be SMART goals. So again, we discussed SMART goals last week on Monday's show. If you guys haven't spent any time checking that out, go back and watch that. I think it's a really nice primer on what we're going to be exploring in today's book outline, simply because, again, if you don't understand SMART goals, you're going to struggle to really define what that WIG, that wildly important goal, is going to be for you and your team. Now, once you've set out with what the WIG is, you need to start really breaking it down into what the book describes as lead and lag measures. And if there's one takeaway I got from this book, I think it's this one. This one just blew my mind when I really started to comprehend it and started viewing anything and everything that I was trying to achieve through this lens. So understand a lead measure is something that literally leads to the success. So usually when we're thinking about wildly important goals, that's going to be a lag measure, right? So that's something that you get. And as we framed it here with SMART goals, X to Y by this date. So again, what is the thing you actually want to achieve? That's probably going to be a lag measure. So focus on activities that drive results. There are two types of metrics that a company can track. Too often we focus on lag measures, which are the results, versus lead measures. So lead measures are the things that are going to actually lead you to that lag measure of success. So a lead measure is predictive. You've got direct influence, or your team has direct influence over it, and you can do this. A lag measure is going to be unpredictable, uncontrollable, and it's something that you get versus something that you do. So lead measure drives results. It's an activity or sub goal that can be acted upon. A strong lead measure will predict success, the lag measure. The team must have direct control or influence over the lead measure. Lead measure is the domino that eventually knocks over the lag measure. A lag measure describes results. This is what your WIG is. Again, WIG, wildly important goal. That's going to be the lag measure there. And you're going to need lead measures to actually get you to that success. So, again, that may sound simple on the surface, but what's really important here is focusing on these lead measures and what's under your personal control. A lot of people, when they first get into sales, it feels like this magical process where you do some things, cross your fingers, hope the stars align, and then someone decides to buy from you. And if you're going about your sales career in that manner, you're not going to have a very long sales career because you're not going to feel like you're actually in control in the driver's seat. Whereas as you take time to break down the process, you can start off with that wildly important goal, the WIG, and reverse engineer the different steps in the processes that actually lead to it. I know Adam and I spent extensive time exploring our wholesaling real estate business and really and breaking it down into the minutia so that we felt like we actually had control over the process. Because one of the biggest frustrating parts was bringing on new team members, new wholesalers, they throw them out into the world, see them struggle and fail, and see them not produce the results that they wanted, and for them to feel like they had no control over the process. The moment you feel like you don't have control over the process is the moment you're going to begin to come up with excuses. It's going to become the moment that you start to find reasons why you can't achieve what you want to achieve. Whereas if you spend time to reverse engineer the process and dial in on what's under my control. So when it comes to sales, it's often going to be things like sales calls, right? How many sales calls did you make today? You can't force the other person on that phone call to buy from you or sell to you, depending upon what your sales model looks like. But you can force yourself to call more people. That's something completely under your control. And what we're going to want to do with a lead measure is really isolate and focus on that as one of our key lead measures, rather than just focusing on total revenue sales, right? Because even think about just in your day-to-day meetings, right? Hopefully you're doing daily meetings or at a minimum weekly meetings when it comes to your wildly important goal. And if you are, you don't want to just get up there and be like, well, we made 0 sales this week. It's not very productive. How do you dial in and try and focus on what's under your control in order to succeed there? Whereas if we're focusing on lead measures and it's like, hey, we made 100 calls this week and we only made 50 calls last week. Maybe you got some sales, maybe you didn't, but that's something you can easily benchmark against that, again, is under your control. It's predictive as well, right? You're not going to make a sale without making that sales phone call. So it's something where once you've got complete control over that lead measure, you can now just go and focus on executing. Whereas again, I see so many people when they get into wholesaling or start sales, they literally think it's this mystical process and they just haven't figured out the secret word, the silver bullet that's going to convince other people to decide to buy from them, when really it's usually just a lack of action they're taking in regards to actually getting those results. Anything on lead or lag measures you want to touch upon, Adam, before I start getting into more specific examples?
Yeah, like I think one thing that you mentioned there that's very important to stress is just the concept of the level of control you can have and the lessons learned from that once you actually start deploying this. Because somebody who's thinking about a lag measure is going to be like, oh, we didn't get enough leads, versus somebody who's thinking about, okay, I need to make 10 offers this week and I'm going to go and have to pick up the phone or go knock doors or go drive around until I actually am able to find the people to make those 10 offers. And what ends up happening too, that I've noticed is such a huge benefit from this change in mindset is is simply the number of repetitions and how much further you're going to get having learned the lessons of having to push further. Because without looking at lead or lag measures, you may think that something, and I'll take it from the context of our business, you might think that making 2 offers a week was actually a lot of offers to make based on the number of leads you were getting. Where if we reframe the problem to what if we did an offer every day, and you turn that into 30 offers in a month, all of a sudden you understand that once you've done that once, you sort of set your 4-minute mile. All of a sudden, you can actually have your performance go exponentially higher. And in doing so, you learn a lot more skills. You learn to become a lot more comfortable with that process, and you get much more honed in on those skills that are going to actually lead to you having success, which I think is really important. And again, it's not about looking at that revenue number, right? I think that's such a common thing that's built in, because what do we celebrate, right? We don't often celebrate the idea, or I think that until you've read something like this book or consumed this show, it'd be easy to think, yeah, we got to celebrate our wins, which means when we get money, right? If you're in a sales role. But in fact, that's perhaps one of the last things you should be celebrating, because it's these things, these lead measures that you can celebrate along the way that are going to lead to the skill development necessary to actually more scientifically capture those sales and that revenue later down the road. And so I think that that's one of the greatest things you could take away from this book and this talk is the level of control and the skills developed inside of that control when you change your mindset from thinking about revenue to thinking about offers made, because that is in your control. The similar thing could go for accounting practices or working with contractors or something. It's like, well, the project went over budget and over time. It's like, well, okay, but how many times did you check in along the way to make sure that it wasn't going to be doing that? And what steps could have been taken along the way? That's a lead measure.
And honestly, this can apply to just about anything and everything where you're seeking to accomplish something. So again, we'll go through some business examples in a second, but even just like tangentially speaking here, I recently was on a phone call with a Canadian like social media influencer comedian. He produces a lot of like skits and different like little comedy videos for like TikTok and Instagram and platforms like that. And we were kind of discussing what his goals were and what his struggles were. And like a lot of content creators, his biggest struggle is just like, well, I haven't gone viral yet, right? Like no one's really recognizing my talent. The algorithm hasn't favored me. And so because of that, I haven't got the same tens of thousands of views as I did 6 months ago or whatever. And we started breaking things down, and I started explaining to him the concept of lead and lag measures. I was like, okay, well, if we're looking at like your social media influencer impressions, number of followers, or number of views, that's kind of our lag measure, right? Let's go with views is our number one lag measure for this content creator. And he wants more views because more views is going to lead to more influence, more general awareness. Is going to create more opportunities. He'll eventually be able to monetize what he's doing, build a business out of that. And, great things will come once he gets more views. And I started exploring. I was like, well, what are you doing to get more views? And he was like, well, I've been thinking about creating different types of content. I've been experimenting a little bit. And just a lot of excuses realistically. And again, nothing unique to this guy individually. It's only unique to all of us, right? And to our individual situations. But I started breaking down for him. I was like, well, let's break down the process, right? So what does it actually look like if we were going to view this through the lens of the 4 disciplines of execution, lead and lag measures? And he was like, okay, well, first of all, I come up with an idea. Then I write a script. Then I shoot the video. Then I post the video. Then I get the views. I was like, okay, awesome. Well, it seems like we're really dialed in on the last part of that. The views part, do we have direct control over? He was like, no. I was like, is it easily predictable? He was like, no. And as we kind of viewed it through the lens that we've already discussed here in regards to lead and lag measures, it became very apparent that he wasn't focused on the right lead measure here. So we ended up dialing in and realizing, oh, it's the number of videos you post. The more videos he posts, the greater the chance that someone's going to view them, right? And at that moment in time, once he's posted them, assuming he's implementing some basic best practices, right? Like using the hashtag or trying to make the content engaging, that's when it's kind of left his hands. And now it's up to the market, it's up to the algorithm to decide the level of success. Since having that conversation with him, the volume of content he's created has skyrocketed, where he went from posting like 1, maybe 2 videos a week because he's been very precious and very scared about posting stuff because he didn't want to screw up the algorithm. But once we kind of viewed it through this new lens of lead and lag measures, he understood instinctively, oh shit, the only thing I can control is how much content I produce. So I'm going to produce a shit ton of content. And now there's a lot of additional benefits to that, right? If you're the sort of person that produces a lot of content, you're getting a lot more at bats, which is just, again, greater opportunities for something to pop off, for something to go viral. But you're also just putting in more repetitions, right? And the more repetitions, the better you're going to get at your craft. And I'm really excited because I believe if he stays on this course, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, or a year from now, he's going to have so much more consistent success than just crossing his fingers and trying to shoot the one perfect video in that regards. Same thing holds true. Like, I'm not actively attempting this right now, but if I was, I know exactly what mistakes I am on why no one follows me on Twitter. Well, it's because I'm not posting anything on Twitter. It's because I'm not actively trying to create content that I believe is engaging for Twitter. Right now, I'm primarily being a lurker. And because I understand this concept of lead and lag measures, it's really easy for me to look at myself point blank and be like, well, clearly you're not prioritizing this because you're not putting in the right efforts, because you understand what the critical parts of the process that are under your control and influence are, and you're not actively participating on them, or you're not actively acting upon them. So again, this can apply to just about anything. When we're thinking about lag measures, viewing it through a lens of a variety of different subjects, one might be for a business, new leads from telemarketing campaign, or another lag measure might be number of customer complaints, or another one might be the number of worksite injuries, or finally, for your personal diet, it could be pounds lost on your new diet. However, just going to the scales and trying to track what's going on with your weight there, well, that's a good lag measure. It's not actually going to lead to any sort of success. Instead, what you need to focus on likely is calories consumed each meal and workouts per week, or even more specifically, calories consumed and calories burned. If you can track just those two simple things, it's going to be very easy to predict, and it's completely under your control in order to drive that calorie deficit that's going to lead to pounds lost if that's the ultimate goal of the new diet or new exercise regime or whatever you're implementing to try and get in better shape. Same thing goes for if we're trying to get the telemarketing campaign. How many numbers of calls are made each day? If we're not getting the results that we want, we can look at increasing the volume of calls, right? And that's something directly under our control. So let's double the number of calls. Well, does that double the number of sales? If so, we found a lead measure that we can really hone in on and focus to drive the success or the lag measure that we want. Same with if we're looking at like worksite injuries. How many safety checks are being done? That's something completely under our control. How many safety discussions are you having, or debriefs with your team, or whatever the case may be, rather than simply having that sign that says 0 days since last worksite injury. What we can focus on is what are we proactively doing. If we're looking specifically through the lens of like marketing, and there's a bunch of examples here, I won't go through them all, guys, but specific for marketing, because again, I think marketing's one that a lot of us struggle on, is a lead measure might be impressions. Lag measure might be the sales calls booked. So is there a way, if we're trying to book more sales calls, that we can get our stuff in front of more people? Can we look towards different avenues? Can we look towards ads being redirected, right? Can we focus on trying to get our stuff out in front of more people? Or maybe it's unique visitors to a website, and that's going to drive the return on investment we get. Or it could be the session duration. How long are they on your social media platform? How long are they on your website? That may directly impact your customer acquisition cost, or it may impact the value of each customer that you acquire. The number of engagements could directly impact the search volume when we're looking at lag measures related to marketing. There's another segment here. If you guys want, check out the Substack. You can go deep into it on manufacturing indicators. But that essentially is the full concept for lead and lag measures. When I understood this, I started to really understand that any problem I have in business is usually because I haven't looked at it through the lens of lead and lag measures. So again, really encourage you guys, if you're struggling in an aspect of your business, go read the 4 disciplines of execution or listen to it. Then try and break down your processes and figure out what are the key lead measures, what's the key lag measures, and start focusing all your efforts on the lead measures. A lot of us, when you first launch your new YouTube channel, your new Twitter account, or whatever, it's really easy to just want to sit there on the page and refresh and hope that somehow magically your number of subscribers or followers increases. However, what we should be focused on is creating more content, trying to drive more impressions. That will eventually lead to the lag measure of getting the results we want. The next key point here. So the first point again was wildly important goals. Only have a couple of those. The second is lead and lag measures. View everything you're trying to accomplish through those. The third one here is compelling scoreboards. And this one, there's a fantastic analogy in the book, but essentially they just talk about a pickup game of basketball. Walk onto any random park, any random basketball court, and within a few seconds of observing how the players play, you can probably tell whether they're keeping score or not. And one of the easiest ways to understand if someone's keeping score or not is by the action of the individual players. If they're keeping score, they're likely celebrating when they actually do score. They probably are playing a more active defense. They probably are passing the ball more, not hogging the ball, and they're working more united as a team. Whereas the guys that are just goofing around on the court, very quickly you'll see them taking the shot from, half court. You'll see them hogging the ball. You'll see everyone trying to dunk or do the layup rather than working as a cohesive team. No one's running back to play defense when the other team gets the ball and rushes your side of the court. Now, that's a very simple example, and yet for a lot of us in business, we don't have easy ways to tell score on whether we're making success toward our lead and lag measures. And yet it's completely within our control to create a compelling scoreboard. And the way the book really breaks it down is they continue upon the sports analogy. Every single sport has a scoreboard, or at least every single sport that I'm familiar with has a scoreboard. And usually within a couple seconds, you can tell who's winning and losing based upon that scoreboard. Well, it's the same thing true for your business, for your corporate entity, because for a lot of us, it isn't. Usually you're like, oh, well, I'm going to have to open up like 6 spreadsheets and 3 different tabs. And I can tell you once I go through the data, we maybe only look at the data in our monthly or quarterly or annual meetings. Well, no, that's not a compelling scoreboard. In fact, with our wholesaling business, we experimented with this and taking it to kind of the extreme, essentially, of having an online scoreboard where any of our wholesalers could log in. We were creating cartoon caricatures of them and making very colorful, playful scoreboards, but they were only tracking a handful of indicators, and those scoreboards naturally ranked based upon the results that you were actually generating. So it became very easy to understand who was saying their lead measures, who was saying their lag measures, and it'll come as no surprise the individuals that consistently hit their lead measures were consistently hitting their lag measures because, again, it was very clear for them to understand, am I winning or am I losing? And this kind of leads into the fourth final key point of this book, which is the cadence of accountability. So it's great if you've got a wildly important goal. It's great if you've broken it down into lead and lag measures. It's great if you've got a compelling scoreboard, but if no one's regularly reviewing that scoreboard, if regularly meeting and discussing your really important goal, if there's not a cadence of accountability, it's really easy for people to become captured by inertia, to find themselves not putting in the effort, to start focusing on the wrong things again. And so in the cadence of accountability, the way the book frames it is that ideally you're going to meet daily, if not at a minimum weekly, in regards to reviewing your wildly important goals, reviewing your progress towards those lead and lag measures, and finally making sure that it's very easy for everyone in that meeting to quickly understand, are we winning or are we losing in regards to these lead measures? And honestly, the fact that I can break down and kind of give a synopsis of everything in this book in 30 minutes is just such a telling feature of how valuable this book is, in my opinion. If you can implement these 4 aspects in regards to your business, you will find yourself having not a difference in degree, but a difference in kind in regards to the success that you're going to be having as a business entity. And if you implement this and it's not working, if you find yourself struggling, I'm going to guess that you just need to go back, re-review the book, rework, and figure out what aspect of the lead and lag measures did you get wrong? What aspect of your scoreboard's not compelling? What aspect of your cadence of accountability isn't working where maybe you're not actually taking the meeting seriously? Maybe the meeting you're having with your employees, you're covering 1,001 different things rather than simply honing in on what's really important. And that's one of the key points here in regards to the scoreboard as well, is a few little tips, is it needs to be simple and fast to read. So you should be able to understand the scoreboard within 5 seconds of reviewing it. It needs to be easily viewable. So again, if you need to enter 8 different passwords and 6 different spreadsheets in order to understand the data, that's not easy and visible. You need to track the lead and lag measures on that scoreboard. You need to operate in real time. So it can't be 2 weeks later, once the accountant comes in and updates the reports, we'll understand whether we're having success or not. And then finally, again, hitting upon that 5-second rule. Can you tell in 5 seconds if you're winning or losing? If you can't, then it's not a scoreboard. It's only a database. And a lot of us fall victim thinking that more data will get us more results. But if that data is not easy to interpret, if that data isn't very clear in how it relates to your lead and lag measures, it's not actually going to help you make better business decisions. If anything, it's just going to add bloat and slow you down as a business leader. So I know this kind of turned into a monologue, Adam, but I know you're a big believer in regards to the 4 disciplines of execution as well. For anyone that wants to do a deep dive, there's a link in this video description to the Substack article. Go make sure you've subscribed on Substack. But what other aspects, I guess, come to mind for you when we're thinking about the 4 disciplines of execution?
Yeah, one element of the scoreboard that I found we did very well when we designed ours was the gamification kind of feeling of it. And if you guys haven't really thought too much about how to gamify your business yet, I think that's a really great place to start, is to think, what sort of incentives can we provide related to the actual lead measure, rather than consistently rewarding the lag measure that was successful, right? If we're only rewarding it when we get the deal, right, or when the project finishes on time, but we're not rewarding the best practices that get us there through those lead measures, I think that is a huge opportunity that somebody could take. And maybe your business is already doing really well, right? Maybe this is a way to double your business, or perhaps more than that. And I think that that's another way to look at this too, is not like, oh, okay, I'm already kind of looking at this. I'm already tracking my offers made versus my revenue generated, or my sales calls made versus, leads generated or something like that. And I think that's a great place to start. It's like, well, how could I maximize the potential of this business, not just try and set some of these things? And I think gamification is one of those things that allows us to continue to do this in the long run, right? It's the more sustainable approach. It's like, hey, let's have fun doing this and reward those behaviors that actually lead to positive outcomes and profitable outcomes, ideally, if we're talking about business. And one way that we were able to do that, Matt, is, and I thought this was genius when you had this idea, was to do the belts, right? We did this sort of game where on a weekly basis, our sales guys would be awarded a belt for actual performance. Now, that was gamifying the reward on the lag measure, but you could see every single week and in our daily meetings that it was our lead measure we were actually tracking, right? Who's making the most offers? That was what was at the top of the scoreboard. And you could tell every single time the people that were honing best into their actual skills, the fundamental skills that were going to allow them to be successful at their job, were the ones that had the best lead measure stats. And that was a really cool way to do it. And through gamification, we elevated it by then awarding this belt. There was one belt for just strict performance, and there was another belt that we had as well for a culture award. And this was a really cool thing, because it turns out culture is one of those hard things to measure, right? How do we properly measure the success of culture? Because, when we look at sales, it's very easy. We have a very good scoreboard. It's money, right? Money coming in. Or if we're looking at, maybe you're an accounting firm, maybe it's expenses being minimized or something like that. And so culture is hard to measure, but it was easy to reward when we knew that somebody was doing a great job. And so what that might look like was positively contributing to our weekly events that we held where the team got together, right? So maybe you brought some great content for the team to watch. Maybe you brought some lessons or takeaways from something that you'd been consuming in a book or a sales course. It was these little things that we could tell. It's like, oh yeah, that is something that is going to lead to better culture. And so we rewarded that with this belt. And I think that type of gamification, right, is a really fascinating way to get the whole team engaged and then start competing with healthy competition over who can make the culture best, right? And it's really cool. We start rewarding those things that lead to positive outcomes. You start getting competition inside your team in a healthy way to see who can best do it, right? Who can get the most offers, instead of, oh, geez, it's pretty hard to make offers, right? Because of the market, because of the product, because of the seasonality, because of the whatever. There's a myriad of excuses you could make. But instead, why don't we just compete on who can do the most, right? And there's some natural pitfalls that I don't think were actually covered in this. So I think that a decent pitfall to mention is, like, if you were to say, set something like sales calls, right? One of the pitfalls is that potentially somebody could game it without actually having any performance associated to it. So they could just start calling numbers, right? They could buy some phone number list off the internet that's not related at all to your product. So I would say when you're making these, sorry, the whips, or how did they
Wigs,
shorten
yeah,
it? The
wildly
wigs.
important goals, yeah.
When you're making your wigs, your wildly important goals, I think it's very important to provide context to your people as well. Why is this the goal? Right. And this is something that Jocko Willink talks about quite a bit, is that if you have people working for you that understand the mission, they can often make much better decisions through decentralized command out there in the field. Okay. So if they understand why, like, how does this goal relate to the success of the company, and what does that mean for them as an individual? And then I think with that context, they can make better calls, right? Not only can they make more calls, but they can make better calls. Okay, I understand we're looking to, sell this particular product, and this is sort of the demographic that's most likely to buy that. Well, I'm going to focus my time on that because I understand how it applies to the wildly important goal, and I understand how that goal applies to my personal situation in the company and in life, right? And I think that's one of the things that I'm not sure he actually really covered in this book, but I believe it's really important. And this is where we can get some of that kind of cross pollination from some different authors and different takeaways, and apply that to a book like this and make it really powerful. So I think that's one of the things you want to be aware of, is like, the things that we set as lead measures, we need to just provide context to how those things apply to our broader mission. And that's how we'll get maximum success out of your people and for your company. So
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons in the book they frame the WIG, the wildly important goal, as it being important that everyone's bought into the process and participates. Because at the end of the day, we're not only looking at lead measures in isolation. We are still tracking those lag measures. And the whole thesis is that the lead measures will lead us to the lag measure, which is the result, the wildly important goal we want. But I 100% agree. The more context you can give to your team, the easier it is for them to buy into the process and believe in it, right? And that's where, like, you as the leader, the business owner, whatever the case may be, it's so important that you spend time on the front end here, going through the 4 disciplines of execution, because you can't expect that your random salesperson or just a random employee is going to necessarily get your entire business process the moment they start, or even if they've been there for a while, right? I think there's a lot of things that oftentimes in businesses aren't documented and aren't necessarily discussed. And because of that, we're less accurate than we could be had we spent the time to really map this stuff out. So last thing I want to lead you guys with is just a quick summary here again of the 4 disciplines of execution. Discipline of focus. Focus on your wildly important goal, the WIG. Number 2, discipline of leverage. So act on lead measures, right? What's the big domino that knocks down subsequently all the other dominoes? Number 3, discipline of engagement. So use a compelling scoreboard, make it easy for people to know, are they winning or losing, and make sure that that scoreboard is tracking those lead measures, right? Because you want to put your people in a position where they can succeed. The best way to put them in a position to succeed is to understand your business processes and make sure that you're focused on the right lead measures that are going to drive towards those lag measures. And then finally, create the discipline of accountability, right? Create a regularly scheduled meeting where it's easy to check in with people to make sure you can troubleshoot on any problems or any pitfalls that they stumble into, and then just keep repeating the process. And I think if someone's really committed to success and you go through this process, it's just a matter of time or repetitions until you're going to achieve the goal you set out. And yeah, again, just love this business book. There's a lot of great business books out there. If you guys have any business book recommendations for us, definitely let us know on the Substack article or jump into the Telegram group. We want this to be a two-way conversation. And we're looking to continuously grow what we're doing here at BDE. So, one thing I want to workshop with Adam when we get off this call is there a version where we can create some sort of accountability group for ourselves? Or maybe we can do it with another content show we do called DGen Friends. Maybe we can get a group of the DGen Friends together there, and we can all set out individual goals and go through the 4 disciplines of execution. Because, again, I think oftentimes with a lot of business best practices, it's easy to hear them. It's easy to nod along and be like, yeah, we should probably be doing that, or I should step that up, or whatever the case may be. But if you don't spend the time and front load the work to build these systems and really commit to them, you're not going to get the results that you actually deep down want. And it's through these 4 disciplines of execution that you can actually achieve those things.
Yeah, and one thing you almost glossed over there too is just the ability to use this process to then identify what you need to laser in on to fix, right? So, like for context, with my business, it was always making offers was the important thing, right? That led to more revenue. But what we started seeing after we actually started really focusing on offers and tracking that is we would see that certain people were better at converting those offers into accepted offers. And then other people might have been better at keeping an accepted offer and having lower attrition on that deal, where the seller would actually extend with us if we needed more time, or where the deal would actually get sold, right? As a key performance indicator as well, as you could get lots of contracts, but maybe they're not at the right price. And so they don't actually get sold. And so what that allowed us to do was focus and take it another level deeper to really focus on the thing that that specific person needed at that time. And one of the contexts, one of the biggest pieces of context you gave to start out this talk is, hey, it's actually a lot of work to run a business, right? Operations management, logistics, marketing, sales, HR, accounting, finance. You're trying to do all of these things at once. Well, what better way to maximize your value to the company than to know exactly what the individual in front of you needs to improve on in order to have greater success? And I think that that's one of the things as well that, should be stressed as well in this book is like when you start measuring these things, you can better manage those things, which allows you, the business owner, or you, the person in control of your life, right, to get the results you want. I found that physical fitness one to be particularly visceral as an example because it's so obvious. If you were taking in 10,000 calories a day, but not moving your body and not changing your lifestyle in any way, and then you were waiting till the end of the month to measure your weight to see if you had lost weight, how obvious would that be that that was not a system that was going to work for you compared to seeing how many calories you were putting in or how much exercise you were outputting in order to fix your situation? I mean, that example is so picture perfect to me. But if you can take that mindset and apply it to things like revenue and lead generation and things like that, I mean, it would be obvious. If you're not making offers, you can't have revenue. You just can't, right? And so I love that. I love that analogy, and I'm so glad that that was included in your presentation, Matt, because I think that really helps to paint a picture, right?
Yeah, business doesn't need to be nearly as complicated as a lot of us make it out to be. The same with health and fitness, right? I think that what's fascinating is oftentimes you'll see, people crushing it in their health and fitness or crushing it in business, but struggling in the other. And it's oftentimes because we just don't take the same principles that work for us in that one endeavor and actually turn over and apply it to the other one, right? So if you've already got the discipline where you're in great shape, you've got the capabilities and discipline to be able to become great at business, right? Or become financially responsible. And the same works in the opposite direction. And yet so many of us struggled to accomplish both at the same time.
Do you know what my grandma said to me today? I was leaving my house from Thanksgiving, and it was actually a more profound thought than what she was giving it credit for. But she essentially said, and I honestly don't believe I struggle with this, but she said to me as I was leaving, she said, "I hope you take your downtime as seriously as you take your business." And I was like, "Oh shit." And like thinking about it out loud, like if you had taken any of these other things, like say accomplishment of your personal goals as seriously as you take your business, or if you're on that inverse where maybe you're totally shredded, you're just absolutely jacked and killing it in your personal life, but then struggling to make money or struggling to build a business, I think that idea, that concept is really interesting. And it's something I had recommended you guys read before on the show is the 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. And one of his rules was that you should take care of yourself as if you were somebody that you needed to take care of. Like essentially like, take care of yourself the way you would take care of your grandmother if she was sick or something like that. And it's like, oh, damn, that's a pretty profound thought. Like, what if I just changed my thinking on this? So interesting thought, and definitely applies here to the 4 disciplines of execution, because you could see how easily you could shift your mindset, apply this strategy, and start measuring the things that matter and hone in on those things. And I think just a final thought here before we beat this subject to absolute death is the concept you started with. And again, it's at the start of the presentation, but maximum 2 goals. I think that's so important because it's so easy, man. The fog of war is legit. I mean, it is absolutely thick once you start operating your business because you're constantly behind the 8 ball trying to think about current customers, past customers, and future customers, and all the different various challenges associated with your products and services going out on a daily basis, that it's so easy to get in the weeds and not take a minute to take that 10,000 foot view and say, what really matters here? What is going to actually move the needle? What do we need to focus on a daily basis that's going to compound over weeks and months to give us our annual goal? And boy, is that ever a hard lesson to learn as a business owner. I think that's probably got to be one of the most common disasters that small business owners go through, is just not focusing on fewer goals. Fewer big goals is so important because then you can focus on what actually matters to move the needle there. So, Matt, really appreciate this presentation. Well executed, and an excellent book if anybody hasn't read this.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, appreciate you guys hanging out with us on this Monday episode of BDE. If you did enjoy it, smash the like button, hit subscribe on whatever platform you're watching this on. Reminder, I believe we're currently on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, as well as Rumble. So really encourage you guys, check us out. Please consider sharing. Sharing is caring when it comes to growing any sort of new content business. And join the Substack, join the Telegram chat, and we'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same place, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll begin started.
Awesome. Yeah, let us know if you guys want that accountability group. I'm in.
Let's do
Have an excellent day, guys.
They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play.